Modern life. Between careers, kids, and health, it can be mayhem. That's why we're here. I'm Dr. Lisa Varghese Kroll.
And I'm Dr. Lanre Falusi. We're physicians, moms, and longtime friends who break it all down for you. Wondering how to juggle all the balls and still stay sane? Looking for advice but don't want to be overwhelmed?
Curious about how to make the most out of life for your family but enjoy it at the same time? You're in the right place. Welcome to Health and Home with the Hippocratic hosts. On this episode, we talk about kids and technology. How do you help your children reap the benefits of the technology and devices available to them without letting that technology take over? Hello, Lanre.
Hello, Lisa.
How are you doing?
Fantastic. Drowning in worksheets, but otherwise great. And you?
The COVID life,
You
right?
living the COVID life. Yeah. How about you?
Same here. So I'm excited to have a chance to chat with you and think about something different for a while.
Yes, agreed. And thankful too that we're healthy, families are healthy, and but thinking about others out there who are struggling at this time.
Exactly. We really want to, for all of you listening out there, we want to acknowledge that, we're still in the thick of it with COVID-19. We know all of you are as well. And we're so grateful to our fellow healthcare workers, to all essential frontline workers. Very, very, very grateful for everyone that's participating and helping to fight this on behalf of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And, the topic of this episode today is kids and technology. And we wanted to also acknowledge the fact that our relationship to technology has to be different during this time. So while there are some recommendations that we would have followed differently, when things were a little bit more normal, we recognize that some of these restrictions that we might have typically had may need to be lifted or may need to be more gentle while we're in the midst of a global pandemic. With that said, thank you so much for joining us. And we're excited to kind of tackle this issue that I know that all modern parents have had to face in one way or another.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about kids and tech. All right. So we wanted to start with just kind of laying the land and talking about the current state of screen time in kids and our own experiences, what we see in our clinical experiences. So, pop quiz, how many hours of screen time do you think the average child gets in the United States? All types of screen time total, the average American child gets 5 to 7 hours a day.
That's serious.
Right. Yeah. And we're talking about sedentary screen time, which might be passive, like watching TV, which averages out to about 3 hours a day for kids in the US. Or it could be interactive, like learning games on a tablet, but we're talking about sedentary screen time, not, YouTube exercise videos. So younger kids getting less, older kids getting more. So remember, average of 5 to 7 hours means about half of the kids are getting more than that. So thinking about teenagers texting on their phones or using whatever apps kids use these days. Is this on Facebook? No? Snapchat?
We're totally dating.
MySpace? So more, I think, than most people realize, and adding up all those little times in the day that someone might be on their phone, that's how we get to that average of 5 to 7.
I mean, if you think about it, that's like probably half the child's waking hours.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, kids also spend on average 7 hours a day at school, depending on their age. So thinking about the fact that they have sometimes an equivalent amount of time in front of a screen or more, is a little frightening. To be fair, some of that might be educational time. So like I said, learning games, that sort of thing. But still a lot of time being sedentary and looking at our screens. We'll talk about what some of the recommendations are, but I'll say in my own personal experience, like I get it. It is really tough to stick to guidelines that recommend limiting screen time for your child. We did a decent job with our first child. The recommendations at that time was to have no screen time under 2 years of age. And we were able to do that fairly well, and then, gradually allowed more screen time over time. What we try to do now is no screen time from Monday through Friday, and just keeping her, busy with like really school and aftercare. I'm that mom who's picking up my child at 6:29 p.m. when the aftercare closes at 6:30. Um, and then we, though, significantly relax the rules on the weekends. As in, there are pretty much no rules on the weekends when it comes to screen time, and feeling okay with that because we have less screen time during the week. But of course, now in the time of COVID, she gets more screen time on some days than she used to. Try to keep it educational, not always perfect with that. Plus, she gets to watch Frozen, like, probably she's watched it probably a billion times in the last 6 weeks. Like, I think she's gonna wake up one day with this like long braid and tell me she wants to go find some magical forest, with her sister. Like, okay, see you guys later.
Yeah, I totally understand. I feel you because same thing. We also severely limited our children's screen time. Again, at the time when they were that little, the recommendation was no screen time for children under the age of 2. And of course, that's much easier to do with your first child than your second child. But the second
Mm-hmm.
one does see the older one watching TV if by that point they're over 2. But that is what we did. And now TV is same with us. TV is limited only to the weekends. But of course, now, this is excluding computer time since they're now distance learning. And my 10-year-old spends most of the day on the computer doing all her assigned schoolwork. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, our goal really, and this is still a work in progress, but our goal is for our children to think of technology as only one of a long list of potential things they could do. So I'd like them to think of drawing and playing with their Legos and running outside and playing on their tablet and reading a book. I'd like it to be somewhere on the list, but not the first thing. And that's kind of what we're trying to aim for, although that's challenging given the current situation in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. Again, there are no rules in the days of COVID when it comes to some of these things. No, I mean, certainly, yes, we could all still try to, at least find other activities to round out a child's experience for the day, even recognizing that it's more difficult these days. And I love that idea of like, just reminding kids that screen time is one thing. It's not the first thing necessarily. It's not the best thing. It's not the most entertaining thing, but one of a number of things that you can do to enjoy your day.
Right, which is true for adults too.
Yeah,
Like we also enjoy screen time, so I don't
right.
want to pretend that it isn't interesting, but I really want them to think of it as, not their go-to.
And then in our clinical experience, we see this too, in kids that I see in clinic, parents definitely find it difficult to limit their kids' screen time. I mean, again, screen time, it's a great distraction for a kid who's bored, keeps kids out of trouble, or as you're cooking or cleaning or doing something that you can't have your kids kind of up under you for, putting them in front of the TV is very convenient. So we definitely get that. But families are also looking for ways to make sure that their kids' screen time is helpful for learning and not harmful in some way.
Right. And as a rehab physician, where I have seen devices come into my clinical experience has been when we've seen teens whose device addiction directly led to car crashes and really severe injuries. If you're admitted to an inpatient rehabilitation facility, you've probably had something very severe happen to you, like a spinal cord or a brain injury. And then there are teens whose device addiction interfered with their rehab and recovery. So after having had a rehab admission and going home, they really weren't keeping up with their home exercise program or their outpatient therapy regimen because they were spending so much time gaming or on their YouTube channel or whatever it might be. So there are, multiple ways from a clinical standpoint that devices and the overuse of devices can adversely affect our children.
There's definitely the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology and kids.
Right, exactly. Because we don't want to vilify technology at all. I would think that Lonre and I would both say that we are pro technology. We've been early adopters of a lot of different
Mhm.
devices and modalities. So we certainly
Like
believe.
MySpace. Back to that.
We really need to let our listeners know that about 20 plus years ago, Lonre was the proprietor of a very avant-garde GeoCities that listed
GeoCities.
all our college inside jokes. I used to log on to that site and just crack myself up reading it. It was so cool. The height of like 1999 cool.
Oh man, I had those animated GIFs before you guys even knew what GIFs were. The like book that opened and closed, the globe that spun. This is an
Yeah.
amazing website. I forgot all about that.
But yeah, so clearly we believe there's good in technology. You know, it can obviously be very useful for learning, especially things that parents may not be able to teach their children. Things like a different language or a different skill. An example is that I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. And so I grew up taking French, and my children here in the States are taking Spanish. And I can't really help them with their Spanish homework. So the internet and technology can be very helpful in that situation. It's also obviously very good for communication with distant loved ones. You know, what would our kids do without FaceTime? They can talk to their grandparents,
Mhm.
which is wonderful. And technology is also great for engagement with the culture. You know, for letting your kids kind of understand what the other kids are talking about, what they're into, so they actually know what Pokemon is, or so I can
Mhm.
brainwash them into loving the Great British Baking Show with me. You know, all sorts of useful things. But of course, with the good, there's always another side to the coin, and we know that there are multiple risks. You know, there are significant risks to either early or too much childhood screen time, and those risks include things like obesity. We know that MRIs show brain differences of children with high quantities of screen use, so actual functional cerebral changes, which is concerning, I think, from a parent's point of view. None of us want our child to have a brain that's formed differently because of excessive screen time. Lower scores on thinking and language tests, poor sleep, which is essential, particularly in childhood, for cell repair and normal growth, and impaired behavior and attention. We certainly know that attention deficit disorders and behavioral issues have been linked to excessive screen
Mhm.
time, either through being exposed to poor examples of behavior or being exposed to modern television shows which involve a lot of fast cuts and special effects and strobe effects and things like that.
Yeah, it's so like educational if you watch TV and put it on mute and
Right.
just look at even children's TV, things move so quickly,
I know.
fast pace. It's hard to, especially with cartoons, I would say. So you can imagine what happens to a child's attention if they're exposed to that for hours and hours every day.
Exactly. If they're not expected to sit and pay attention to a scene because it's just going to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really interesting and how we expect that to transfer to schooling, where you do need to sit and think for a while if you want to grasp concepts.
Right, right.
And then, you know, there's the ugly, which I think we've all heard about, which is kids getting access to non-kid friendly materials on the internet. There have been examples of purveyors of pornography placing their wares or their materials on the internet under child-friendly titles. So, you know, Elmo goes to school, which is actually a porn video, in the hopes of luring children in. So that's pretty scary for parents. And then bullying on social media for children as they get a little bit older, start to have their own social media accounts. We know that while in previous generations bullying was contained in the schoolyard, now it follows our children home, and they no
Mm-hmm.
longer have a safe haven in their home because these bullies and their cruel words and lies that they may be spreading are on the internet, available for anyone in the world to see. So that's a huge burden that's on our children's shoulders. So, Lonray, you know, knowing all that, what can we do about it?
What can we do about it? So the great thing is people have thought about this. There are groups of pediatricians, family physicians, media experts who thought about, how do we make sure that we think about technology and media in a positive way for kids, and not just focus on like what not to do so that parents just don't feel, guilty every day.
Right.
So some great, just like general guidelines to think about. First, it really starts with us as parents. Think of yourselves as role models. So how often are your kids looking at you and seeing you with a phone in your hand?
Right. I know.
Yeah.
It makes me feel so guilty. It's so true.
Yeah, right. Because it's so easy to just send off that one quick email or, respond to those texts. But as kids see us with our devices and then we limit their own, screen time, it may make it hard for them to follow those rules. So think about putting away your screens when your kids need attention, actually like physically putting the phone down, putting it away. There are studies that show that having a phone on your desk, even if you're not necessarily looking at it, decreases your attention to
Mhm.
the things around you. Also, just thinking about generally making screen time social. So, if your child is watching something on a tablet, have them show you, have them show you what they're looking at, what they're watching, what they're learning from their screens, so that it's not just an isolated time. And then pick some media free times together. So, for us, it's dinner time for sure, or any meal time. There are no devices
Mhm.
at the table, or you may choose driving as a media free time to ask your teenager really how their day went.
Right,
Have like a full conversation,
right.
and without the phone in their hand. The answer will still be fine. I get it, but you can try to open that door. um,
Right.
and maybe some media free locations in the home, like your bedrooms, for
I love that.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of putting some guardrails around when or where you use technology like that. And then just generally, especially with older kids, having that ongoing communication with them about, online safety, about being kind to others, treating people with respect online and
Mhm.
offline, speaking up when you see people being bullied, that sort of thing. Kids just mature and develop, and a 1-year old is vastly different from a teenager. So there are some age specific recommendations as well. So we'll share a couple of those with you. These come from the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, which is a professional organization of 67,000, almost 70,000 pediatricians. So the recommendations for kids under 18 months is to avoid all screens except for video chatting. Grandparents need to see their grandkids. Having that face-to-face in quotes time, with
Totally, yeah.
yeah, with friends and family is totally fine for kids at all ages, including the babies under 18 months. And then from 18 months to 2 years, in that 6 month time, you can start to choose, you can choose to start some screen time, focusing on programming that's high quality, that's educational, thinking of yourself as your child's media mentor, as the AAP says. So you are your child's teacher, into screen time and media. So showing them healthy ways to use media, not giving them too much time with it, but opening up that door at that age with high quality programming is reasonable. And then for the next few years, at 2 to 5, toddler preschool time, limiting screen use to 1 hour a day is very reasonable. And again, still focusing on high quality programs. So those that may teach some language skills or communication skills, or that have examples of how to be kind to others, that sort of thing. And then from that 6 years and up, there are fewer sort of like set rules on the number of hours, because at that age there's more variety
Mhm.
of media available to kids. So the recommendation there is just to place consistent limits on the time spent on media, some limits on the types of media, making sure that's not getting in the way of the things that Lisa talked about, the physical activity, your sleep, your development. If you're seeing negative behaviors related to screen time, thinking about limiting it even more, or again, only certain times of the day or only certain places. But being consistent at that age is key. But we always want to remind ourselves and remind you all, you're not a bad parent if you don't follow the directions perfectly.
Exactly.
Especially times like now when we're in the middle of a crisis and everyone is just trying to do their best.
Right.
And also, again, like with young kids, it is harder to follow these guidelines, I think, as they have older siblings who are maybe watching TV and the baby's crawling around and, gets distracted by the TV here and there. That's completely understandable. And again, just trying our best to balance any screen time with really great developmental activities, talking, singing, reading to your child. Those are the things that you can do to make sure that we are doing our best to really encourage the positive development in kids.
Right, exactly, to have a healthy relationship with technology and media. So that leads us to our physician mom life hack of the week. And this time we are recommending the AAP Family Media Toolkit. And the reason is because this toolkit, which we will place in our show notes on our website at hippocratichosts.com, this helps you create a personalized family media plan that's specific to your kids' ages. And this media plan helps you talk with your kids about some of the things that we mentioned: screen-free zones, screen-free times, like crossing the street, because although that seems obvious, we should always assume nothing.
Oh yeah, I definitely see people crossing the street with their face in their phone.
Right.
Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I'm like, someone could run a red light. Like,
Gosh,
heads up, heads up.
I'm very attached to my spinal cord. I
Yeah.
feel very strongly that crossing the street should be a screen-free time.
Yeah.
That's something
Yeah.
that we need to teach our children. And the toolkit also helps you talk about digital curfews, good manners, things like not looking at devices when speaking to others. How many times have we seen children not know that that's really not something that's polite? Digital citizenship, things like not forwarding photos online without permission, and safety, things like not speaking to strangers online without parental supervision. So we really hope that you'll check that out and use that as a tool that can help your family navigate what is still a relatively new set of waters.
Mhm.
Our parents and grandparents didn't have to deal with, but luckily these resources are there that can help each of our families address it in a healthy manner.
Yeah, great. And depending on your child's age, really involve them in making some of these decisions. So it's a family plan, family decisions, and then you as a parent feel less like you're just being the screen time police, but rather just reminding them that we as a family, we came up with this plan together, and we are being accountable to one another when it comes to our screen time.
Exactly.
So thank you all for joining. Hopefully you found some of these tips helpful. Hopefully any guilt that you came into this with has been alleviated. We're all in this together. We're all figuring it out together. But hopefully with these tips, you will feel closer to feeling that you're using media in a healthy way in your home. So remember to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And please review us on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Rate us, review us, download us from your favorite podcast app, and then get excited for next week's episode.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited on book recommendations. So are you looking for new titles for your nightstand? Or how about your kids? Are they desperately in need of a new story or two? Or are you like me? Do you freeze when people ask you what your favorite book is? Like there's so many. So we're going to be sharing our best recommendations with you.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Health at Home with the Hippocratic hosts. Remember that all views expressed here are our own, not our employers, and all content is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice, nor the establishment of a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult your own physician or healthcare team for any medical issues.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate us, subscribe, and tell a friend. And check out our website at www.hippocratichosts.com for show notes on this and all our episodes. Can't wait to chat with you next time.